Okay, so today we're largely talking about Hypershade, and we opened this up before when we talked about materials, where we sort of introduced materials, okay? And there's a lot more to Hypershade, I'm sure, that you saw when we opened it up. And I'm going to go through a lot of the pieces and the sort of the useful ones. Hypershade's really, really dense because there's sort of more to it than, first of all, that you need and may ever need, but it's sort of pushed in your face and you sort of have to be aware of it or how to sort of get around it. So it's not, the things that you need to worry about are less complex than it is, if that makes any sense. Okay, so there's, like I said, there's lots of stuff in here, but you can ignore a lot of it. So, okay, so this is the default that when you open it up that you'll get, that everybody gets, and you can custom, just like any other Maya, interface, you can customize it pretty much any way you like, okay? So by default, you have your create area over here, okay? And your create area contains essentially all the little nodes that you can use to make materials and effects. Actually, this thing, like I said, the Hypershade plugs into the rest of the software to do all kinds of things, put effects on lights, put effects when at render time, all this stuff, but what you really use it mostly for is, designing your materials for things, whatever they may be, okay? So the ones like the objects that we handed out last week already had materials on them, so we didn't need to worry about it, and like I said, we kicked around some very briefly, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, okay? So anyway, we'll come back around to these, and so this is where you sort of get your resources to make materials, okay? And this is sort of your work area. You have a bunch of different choices. You can actually make tabs, so you can make yourself different workspaces. So because it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly over here, okay? And we'll go through some of these when we have more materials in here. Over here is your material view, which we talked about, where it's going to interactively show you what your material's looking like. Okay, if your renderer is set to hardware, generally you want to switch it to Arnold, because if that's a renderer you're going to be using, so that you're looking through the render, the render that you're actually going to use. You don't want to. You're going to get things that don't work if you use the hardware renderer. Okay, you have a choice on what you'd like the material to be rendered on. It can be, you can see it on cloth. Like if you're designing a cloth material, obviously you'd use that. You've got a teapot, the old classic teapot. A flat ocean surface if you were designing an ocean surface. You get the idea. I'm not going to go through all these. These ones are kind of cool because it's like if you're designing a liquid.
Are you getting Hypershade again?
Sorry, it's right. I mean, there's several ways. Windows, animation rendering editor, rendering editors, Hypershade, or it's right here. It's this little ball icon in the rendering rollout at the way the top here. Okay. So yeah, so this is like a splash, you could do that sort of thing. Boy, my machine seems buggy. Hold on one second. Okay, it's just me. Okay, so yeah, like I said, you got lots of choices, spheres, and then the shader ball being an idea that you can see what what radius is going to look like, big smooth areas, all it's just kind of everything you might encounter in an object on one object, okay? You can spin it around just like any other. It's just a render view that you can do whatever you want with. So if I hold down my Alt key, ooh, yeah, like my machine. Like I said, my machine feels really boggy. So something complaining. Yeah, something is pegging. Sorry, hold on one second. I think it's just Arnold is just choking. Okay, so then we also saw that you have these lighting environments that you can between, which are really handy. So you can see, you know, the way a material is going to look inside in two different scenarios, and then you can also load in your own HDRs. That, remember, I had that studio one that I loaded in here, like so. So this is that studio. So this is really nice because, you know, once again, you don't have to constantly be you know, putting this on your in your scene in a render. It's updating, you know, instantly. Okay. So next to that, ooh, there we go. Okay, so next to that, you can, you know, if you're getting bogged down like I am, you see how my sort of interface is going pretty slow. You can pause it here. And when it's red around the corner, or red around the outside, it's not rendering any longer. Okay, it's like in pause mode, so everything's going to be nice and fast, and I can zip around and do whatever. Okay, so, you know, if you're not making tweaks, it's a good idea to turn it off so that it's not constantly trying to update itself. So if you're sort of building something and then you want to see the final output, you pause it, wait, and then, you know, kick it on to see what you're getting. Okay, so. And then up here, what you have here is essentially a list of everything shading and rendering wise in your scene. Okay, your first is materials. So you have these first three, sadly to say. So that Lambert is that. Remember that one we talked about when we first really talked about materials. Now, so just to see something in your viewport, Maya has to make a default material, just a simple default material, and that's what this is. So, you know, I mean, one thing you can do with this that's kind of handy is you can mess with it. Like if you know, if you don't like the color, you know, so if I pop a new sphere in here, okay, it has that Lambert on it, okay, like it's just gray or whatever. But, you know, say you don't like the contrast of it, you know, there's nothing stopping you from changing it, and, you know, I could make it, you know, have a little bit of blue in it, or, you know, whatever you want to do. But, you know, one of the best things you can do is just sort of just you know, make sure that it's sort of popping off of your background. Like some people like dark objects to be a little darker like this, you know, depending on if you like to have this on all the time, right? Or wait, you got to turn it. There we go. It's all a preference. So anyway, so the point is that this is always going to be in your scene, whether you like it or not, but you can tweak with it. So anytime a new object is made that doesn't come in with a material, like something maybe you imported or whatever, sometimes materials come along with that. It's going to get that Lambert thrown on it, and that's the end of it. Okay. The other two are pretty much just useless for the most part. They're not assigned to anything. They're just sort of a get started thing, but they're not deletable. So, you know, these three will always be in a new Maya scene, and you know, like I said, this is the one you can mess with, and these are ones to sort of get effects started, and they've just been there since day one. And like I said, there's just not much you can do about it. So anyhow. Okay, so but then also there's a list of all your textures in the scene, your utility nodes, which we'll talk a little bit about, your rendering nodes. Even your lights are listed here if you have any lights in your scene, because, you know, as you've seen, like lots of times you want to have textures on your lights, you know, that soft box or a spotlight or whatever. You know, you want to have that on. You want to be able to wire that stuff up, so you can get at your lights here to do that kind of stuff. Your cameras are available here. I mean, you know, all that stuff is here. Shading groups, which we won't talk too much about right now. Bake sets. You can actually even see your overall project here. Just like if you go to your project editor, like you can, you know, you could, if you kept your maps or whatever in this scene, like source images here, third-party textures. You could drag them in. So it's just like a little file browser just to sort of save you time, okay? So they have all, geez, this thing really wants to dock. There we go. And asset nodes we don't have to worry about. So this is like a big, you know, it's just a big list of everything that you know, sort of need to worry about in your scene without having to go out to your scene to get it, right? Because, you know, the Hypershade is so complicated, and there's, you know, a lot of stuff that you'll be doing in here that you know, it's really lots of times best to have it full screen, because you can see even on my monitor, like, you know, there's plenty of stuff going on already. Okay, so The other thing that you have available to you here is called bins. Okay, bins are just an organizational thing for yourself, because as just as we talked about, when you have lots and lots of assets in a scene, you need to be able to organize them. So it's like, if you have, once again, 100 different materials, and you're trying to keep track of stuff, you want to be able to say, okay, here's all the materials for some character or something. Yeah, so, or whatever it might be, the clothes, you want to put tree materials in another one, whatever it might be, right? So creating bins is easy. There's always, the master bin is going to contain everything, and it's going to reflect up here, right? So if I create a new bin and I say, whatever, scene materials, and they can contain whatever you like too. They don't necessarily have to contain just materials or whatever. Any of these things up here, the textures, the lights, blah 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 blah, right? So you can create as many of these as you want, and they're separate outside of layers or whatever. They're just for materials, right? So you could say cloth materials, and you could sort them out that way, right? Okay, and then so you just grab what you want, right click and add selected. Basically it's handled almost exactly like layers. Okay, so if I click that, now I click this, now you see it's sorted out. So in the master bin, it's going to show you everything, but if I get down to cloth materials, that's the only one I put in there, this stuff. There it is. So once again, if I had 50 of them, the 50 would show up, or if I had 10 or whatever it might be. Okay, so the point is, it's just an organizational thing, because it's really easy to get lost in your sheer amount of materials, and sometimes not. Sometimes you have a simple scene and you got 5 materials. Who cares? Like, no problem, right? But the more complicated things get, the easier it is to get lost in what you have. Okay. Okay, so up at the top here, in the list that you get here, you got a couple of ways that you can view things. You can view them with a sample, a rendered sample here, or you can just have them as a list here. Okay, if things once again get too complicated, a list sometimes is nice. It depends. And these are the sizes. If you wanted to, depending on what you want, you can make a really super big sample. You can make a medium sample, a smaller sample, and a little teeny tiny sample. Same thing with the name. The name list can be teeny tiny, blah blah blah. Okay. So if you name your materials properly, lots of times that's fine. This is fine because you know what you're looking for. If I said this and I said, default surface, boom. Okay. So you see that it changes here. It changes here in the browser, and obviously it changes right there in the name. Okay. So, I mean, lots of times like this, I think this is kind of a good view because you see what you're getting at. Okay. You choose the way you want to sort them, sort by name, or you can sort by type if you want to, sort whatever, sort by the time that you made them. You have a bunch of different ways in what you can see them. Okay. Yeah, okay, and then you can refresh, right? Sort in reverse order. So you could go Z to A to Z, show your oldest, show your oldest materials or assets or whatever they might be. Show them, whatever that way. Okay. So by default, they show you a lot of the things, a lot of the windows that are available to you in the Hypershade are open in the default view. But one thing that's really handy, especially when you're doing putting materials on objects in Hypershade, like full screen like this, okay, is a viewport. Okay, so if you go like this, I'll get a viewport, okay, and then I can dock it wherever I like. Okay, so I'm gonna actually put it over here and bring this down. Because your bins are, I don't know. We'll go to a create. So okay. So now what I have is a regular viewport that you'll see, like it's just a perspective view. So if I move this, see it moves back there too. See that? And then I can just hit 5 on my keyboard to render it. So the reason that you would do this is now I can look at everything in my scene and I can assign materials or get them off of objects without having to minimize this and try and sort of juggle 2 windows. Okay, so I can keep my Hypershade wide open like this. And like I said, I can get at my objects, and you'll see what I mean by that in a minute, okay? So the rest of these, or not the rest, but most of these are open. So browser, that's this. Property editor, that's all this stuff. Material viewer, that's this guy right here. Create, we saw that. That's where you get at your nodes. Bin, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea, okay? You can also open a render view here where you can do an IPR actually on the scene, which, you know, it's kind of cool, but sort of gets in your way because it's going to do a full render instead of, trying to render just a little doodad off to the side here. No lights, so it didn't render, so it didn't bother. So this is a kind of a nice setup, I think, because like I said, you can get at your objects, who's assigned to what and who isn't assigned to anything, but you can also design materials at the same time without bobbing back and forth, okay? Okay. So, so the general workflow, like I've said in the past, Maya has like a lot of connections going on in the background that it sort of doesn't show you, right? And there are connection editors to allow you to sort of plug whatever you want into almost whatever else you want, okay? And that's no more apparent than in the material editor here, right? Because plugging things into other things is really the best way to, can you put your phone away, please? Is the best way to make materials, okay? Because there's lots of ways to save time and also just to sort of make things a little more efficiently by reusing pieces over and over again. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second here. So like I said, there's tons of nodes over here that you'll see, and like I said, the beauty is that you can forget about a whole lot of them, okay? And the nice thing is they have a little favorites tab up here, okay? Or a favorites rollout or whatever you want to call it, right? So, almost any time you use one of these, you should throw it in your favorites so you can get right at it and you're not sort of peeling through it, okay? Peeling through the list over and over, okay? They also have a search here, which allows you, if you know it's out there but you don't remember what it's called, or you want to go look for it, you can just say, or sadly it doesn't do wildcards. It doesn't do wildcards, so you do have to spell it right. So, oh wait, no, it doesn't. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't do wildcards. So, like, if I was looking for an image loader for Arnold, I'd say AI. Why am I not? Oh, I'm not in the Arnold tab. Damn it. Okay, so it does. You just have to type part of it. So if I wanted to load an image using the Arnold renderer, so I'm down here, and you see how things are broken off. Like, this is Maya, meaning like the Maya renderer, and then this is the special stuff for Arnold, right? So if I'm on the Arnold tab and I type image, you'll see up comes that, and I click on it, and I get an image loader, which we've seen before. That's the thing I use to load the environment. That's the thing that I plugged into the lights to use the softbox and all that stuff, right? So, you can click these, and they'll just keep creating them until, whatever, okay?
Andy, just real quick.
Sure.
Out of curiosity, just say like we accidentally inserted the AI image from like not the Arnold tab. Would it just render really weird? Or
no, you would actually see it. I mean, if you did that, why? And that's a really good question. And that, like, it's like you're sort of here you're sort of exposing what's happening in the background anyways. And that if I go in and I create a light and I move it away, and I do exactly what you just said, right? And I click here. See, I'm getting the same, see this? I'm basically getting the create render node that's right here. Oh, damn it. There we go, okay. I'm getting the same thing that's down here. I'm doing almost I'm using the same kind of thing. And I go to Arnold, I'd say AI image. And you see what just happened there? It loaded it in, and here's that light shape, right? Okay. Normally it'd be hidden from you. You'd go in here, and if I plugged it in by going to wherever the heck I hid those, documents, desktop, downloads. There it is, softbox. So if I load that softbox, like, now, like I said, this is just exposing what you just did there in the interface. So they're exactly the same thing, it's just it's exactly the same output or conclusion. It's just whether you wire it up by hand or if you're sort of letting the interface do it. So it's, once again,
ways to do it.
it's exactly it, right? It's exactly the same idea. So here's the light I just created, and here's that image, including a point to the softbox that I just made. Okay, so. Like I said, that's a really good question, and that's exactly what's happening, So, and vice versa, if you went and you clicked on this light, you'd see this wired up if I did it just in here, okay? And there's no right way or wrong way for, especially with this. The benefit here, though, and I'll show you, is that instead of loading multiple times and all that stuff, if I go in here and I make a bunch of more lights, okay, so I got 1, 2, 3, and I knew I wanted them all to be soft boxes, just like the original. I put those guys all next to each other, and I take, and I'll get more into this in a second, but essentially I can take the same image loader and wire it into all 3 lights. Right. So if I made a change here, deleted it or changed it to another file, all these lights, since they're all wired up the same way, oops. Oh, there it is. They have that softbox wired to them. Boom, boom, boom. So I can reuse that over and over and over. And that's kind of the beauty, because, this is just one example, but this goes for just about anything, right? So like if you, a perfect example is like a color, right? So say you had a situation where, you had a color scheme in something, like if you think of an interior of a car, right? The carpet may be gray and the plastic might be gray and this might be but they're all slightly different, right? Well, if you tie those all to one node of color, and you make one change, it would go out to all the materials, whether they be plastic or leather or whatever they might be. So it's like, this is essentially instancing nodes all over the place. And I'll run through some of the, most useful ones in a second. But so the deal is that each node, so if you look at this node, they have their inputs on the left side and outputs on the right side, okay? And you can expand them and sort of contract them with this little guy right here, right? So this, if you want to get things all, super sort of tidied up, if you go like that, okay, that's just the name or whatever, okay? Or if you roll them out, this is like every last little bit of information. So by default, it shows you just sort of the stuff that you'll more than likely be trying to plug into, and it hides some of the stuff away from you. So if you click it, 1, 2, and 3, you see I get a bunch of options, right? Well, these options are just the options that you're seeing over here. So if I click on this, I can plug into, color, intensity, all these things are in there. Oh wait, this is the wrong thing. Yeah, see, okay, so here's your color, there's your intensity, there's your normal to camera. Sometimes they're not gonna be in the same order, but all the things that you can sort of get at and plug into are available when you do this full rollout. By default, more than likely this view is the best one, because all you're going to want to try and do is play with the color and the intensity. Okay, so the same thing with so this is the node for that surface that is on. Well, wait, I think I just threw it on this back object here. Okay. Okay, so that's the surface that we've got here. Same thing, your color, the base color. That's that. So you got your base, you got your color. That's one that you can plug into and map with whatever you want. Your diffuse roughness, your all these things all these options that you have available. You can plug stuff into of almost any kind. You have loading an image is just a start. There's a million other ways to push values into these things, okay? It's just what you're trying to get done, okay? So the other part of this is that, the other part that you see here, I'm sure, is that these things have color codes, okay? So color in in this program in most programs like Photoshop and things like that, at least in this sort of this space, meaning the things that you're making, like when you're doing print, it has its own sort of way that it deals with color. When you're dealing with images for games and other things, you're essentially just dealing with RGB, red, green, and blue. What combination of red, green, and blue are you adding together? And that's a whole nother color theory thing. But if you've ever seen anything about that, like basically you add 100% red, 100% green, and 100% blue, and you get white, okay, which you can see when you essentially open up any of these guys, right? So if you go to a different type, there's your RGB. So so if I drag this down, red, half green gives you this orangey green, and then gives you this yellow. Add in the blue and you get white. You get the idea. It's a combination of those values that are used to describe colors. Okay, so oranges, or orangey yellow is 100% red, quite a bit of green, and however much, all the way down to no blue. Okay, so what they allow you to do is you can actually break those off. By default, when you go to plug something into a red node, it's looking for a color. It's looking for an RGB value, right? And some nodes are going to put out RGB color, and some nodes aren't. Okay, they're going to put out one value, or they're going to put out all three values. Okay, so the green is the point is that the green is looking for one value between 0 and 1, essentially, right? And that's because if you look at the base, what this first thing is base weight, and you notice here that this is just a slider, right? It's just one value, okay? It's 0 to 1, no big deal, right? So that's why this isn't red, and it doesn't roll out like this. See how this is, a color is made of 3 green nodes, but if you roll it down or roll it up like that, it's red, but really underneath it's just three values like this. Okay, so what that means is that when you go to grab something, so I go over here, or I go to my image. So this is my image loader, the one for the softbox. Okay, and you see it over here. See how this is red? Means that, okay, that's going to kick out a color because it's an image, right? It's an image that's red, green, and blue. So to wire it up, all I got to do is drag out of it, click, let it go, and now these two things are wired together. Okay, so now this image is going to go into the base color of this surface. Okay, now if I only wanted one value, the nice thing is if I still can use values out of it, because I can roll this out and say I wanted this just to control like the intensity of something, right? So I could just grab one of the colors, okay, and what's going to come out of it isn't red, it's actually just a color from 0 to 1. So if I wanted to make that control how much this is mixed in there, and how much this base color is mixed in there, I could wire just one of the colors to this slider, and now it's controlling that. Okay, so you're allowed to sort of use these values any way that makes sense and works, pretty much, is sort of the easiest way to say it, because sometimes it doesn't, you're not going to get what you want out of it. Okay, lots of times these have a lot of different values in here. So if you double click, there it goes. So I can actually, just like over here, and I can search for the values. Here I can search, and it'll display. I got to get more out of there. There we go. I can display. Come on, there. You can display the values that are going to come out of it. So if I say color, see, so you're sorting out just the color ones, or I can say out. So it's just basically it helps you search for them in case you aren't seeing it, because once again, like if you roll this one completely out, it's got a lot of values in there that you can map to. Okay, and we'll dig even more into all these, or most of these values, another time, because there's a lot of them, obviously. And I'm just mainly we really want to talk about Hypershade today and how you can wire things together. So So what I'm going to do is actually show you what I mean about sort of well, some of the useful nodes that you can get at, and how you can wire them up. Okay, so you know, a lot of essentially up till now we've largely just dealt with like solid colors on stuff. You know, a red car or this. You know, we haven't talked about any kind of sort of color variance of any sort. Okay, and there are a couple of different types. You know, there's obviously images that we're using here that we were using here to put on these lights, which is a sort of a whole nother ball game, which we'll actually cover. You know, because it's a lot more complicated than using these other methods. But one of your other things that you can really use are what they call procedural textures. Okay, and a procedural texture is textures that are just sort of based in math. Okay, and the great thing about them is that they take up no memory. Well, they don't take up no memory, but they're not an image that you have to load and deal with and all that stuff. They're not anything you have to specifically describe to map onto stuff or, you know, anything like that. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean. So Arnold has one called AI noise for starters, and there's lots of other ones. So it's essentially noise. Okay, it's basically made by, you know, the noise is created by random equations where, you know, they just say, you know, like, I don't know if you've ever seen like fractal noise of patterns, right? And these are just, it's just an equation that tells the computer how something in space should be colored. Okay, so if I take this and I wire this into my base color, okay, and I'm going to actually turn this guy back on. I'm going to reset this. There we go. Okay, so what I've done is I've created this noise node, and if I go over here, you'll see. So there's lots of options. There's tons of options, and lots of times you just have to play with them and sort of figure out which ones you like for what you're trying to do. The great thing about noise is that it's, like I said, you can throw it on an object, and it's sort of free in a way, and that, like, you know, if you look at almost anything, you know, like no surface is perfect, right? So, you know, it's nice to throw these on there even when you're just thinking about a certain color. You know, you know, but you want a little bit of variance in it, just the tiniest amount. Okay, so this noise is actually a pretty simple noise, and there are a bunch of different kinds. You have colors down here that you can choose from. So if I just say, I get my color doohickey, go HSV. I'm going to just throw some red in there. Okay, so I got red and white. Okay, so you see I have pink here, right? But you also see, like, see how part of it's a little less, you know, a little less detailed than the, or a little more pale than the other, right? That's the noise doing its thing, right? So if I come over here, oops. So if you start messing with these, the values of your noise, they, like I said, they all do a little bit something different. Amplitude is going to be almost like a scale, because like I said, these are they're essentially just plugging numbers into an equation to give you a color. So and lots of them I can't even lock you near. Like, I can't even explain what a lot of these are, to be totally honest with you. The easiest way to do it is to sort of mess with your scale. See how I'm getting like stripes in there? So by scaling it up, you'll really see what it's doing, right? So it's putting this randomness going here, and lots of times. So if you run distortion, so if I click up my distortion, it's gonna kind of muck it up. There we go. So now I've got kind of a, I don't know, like a candy or something like that. Then it's literally just distorting it. Okay. iMachine seems like distressingly slow. Huh. Anyways, so okay, so you've got, you know, that like I said, that's Arnold's version of noise. Okay, and if you go into 3D textures in Maya, now lots of the Maya tools that are for their renderer work in Arnold too, right? So you're not just left with the things that work in that Arnold has written specifically. You can use all this stuff. So when you go to 3D textures, what they're saying there is these are generated textures, that are going to be generated on the fly, right? So all these things are available to you. So Brownian is a type of noise, Cloud is a type of noise, Crater, blah blah blah. They even have ones that are sort of pre-made to make, you see all these things. So volume noise, solid fractal, wood. So like I said, these are all, without using an actual texture map, these are all textures, if that makes any sense, that you have access to without doing anything more. And when we get into actual texture mapping, you'll see how valuable this is, because texture mapping is a real pain in the ass, right? So like, if you have an object that like, once again, I mean, I keep going back to my desktop, but it's like, you look at the desktops, right? It's mostly black, right? So you don't want to go in there and like paint a texture when you're just looking to make some areas that are a little more black and a little more shiny, or whatever you want to do, or whatever you're trying to do, right? This is where noise maps like really save your butt, because it's like you can throw that on there, you can tweak it, and you're done. You're not out there painting maps just for something that's subtle, right? So if I go up, like, as you can see, I'm in Maya's, I'm under the Maya tab, and I'm in the 3D Textures tab, and like I said, this is all the things that are available to me. So if I click on Brownian, which is one I know a little bit better, I click on it. Okay. Like I said, this one's a little more, it's a little simpler, which is kind of nice. And it's only, the problem with it is it's only going to kick out black and white, but you could use it for other things, right? So let's see. So I'm gonna disconnect the color from this surface that I've made here, okay? And I'll let it re-render. It's just back to black. I'm gonna give it a little surface, and I give it a little more. So this is just a real simple gray shiny surface, right? So I could take that color, and you notice it's green. That means it's going to want to kick out. Whoa, that's weird. It's not color. It is going to kick out a color, but it's going to be in black and white. But this tab, for some reason, is not colored properly. So if I click on this guy, you'll see what it's doing right here. Okay, this is what it's going to map onto the object in 3D. So if you mess with these values, you see how it sort of just looks like it zooms up on it. So if I was trying to do something subtle, you could go like this. You could, in fact, there you go, up real high like that. Okay. Octaves is a complexity value. If you crank up a bunch of octaves, you get this kind of thing. If you go down, you get a smaller. There we go. Hello. Okay. So yeah, so if you think of this as, like if I go back to my object here and wait a bunch of time, there we go. So if I wanted to plug this into like the shininess of my object here, which is down, here, like I could probably pull it into color. So, if I crank this down, you see essentially it stops being shiny, right? So if you think of that value, see it's black here, okay, means it's pretty much off, and all the way up is 100% shiny, right? So if I plug that value in there, if I say I'm gonna take this sort of jangled up color, this black and white map that's just slightly off color, you'll see what it does to it. So if I take color, now once again, this one is oddly, this is not correct. It should be red, because like I can get at the individual colors underneath, as you see, but I can also get it as a full color. So if I plug that into the right place, which should be, and the nice thing too is you get close to a node, notice how all the ones that it won't plug into disappear, right? So I can go to specular color, which is what we were just talking about, let it go. So if you look close, and so I can come back here and I can actually make modifications to it. You'll see that it messes up the surface. So I'll come back here. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to come back here. And I'm going to make it a little more drastic so that it kind of looks a little more like something. Okay. There we go.
Are you able to extract the color from something else?
What you mean?
Like if you want to use a color of an object to saw, I mean, an object you have a photo of.
Yeah, that we'll get to that. So that's what I mean by texture mapping. Yeah, that's the thing I was kind of saying is a pain in the butt. So now you see, since this is that color of this texture is plugged into my specular color, you see how I'm getting like, you know, it's shiny in places and not shiny in other places, right? So it's just, you know, adding a little bit of something different there, okay? And you know, you can make this any way you like, depending on what you're trying to do. So, you know, I made it so that it's pretty drastic. See, so some areas are going to be completely not shiny and others are going to be very, very shiny. So, you know, to get something that's a little more simple, I'm just going to go like this, and I'm going to plug that into that, and then come back here and get a render. So one trick you can do to figure out how this is you know, what this is actually looking like when it's on the object is just temporarily, you know, plug it into like the base color of the object, and it's going to show up on the object. So if I take that off, you know, because you can plug and unplug these at will. So you see like underneath it, it's like kind of gray and a little brighter and all that stuff. So if I come back here and I mess with it, you'll see exactly what it's going to look like. Come on. Okay, you'll see what it's going to look like if I, you know, mess with it, like make it really, really bright, or let's see. Trying to do some, there, well, no. So some of these things are like contrast, okay? So you see how that's kind of blowing it out or making it a little more contrasty. Okay, and then if I go back to my object, it's on the object. Like I said, so the Brownian only kicks out black and white, which is a bit of a bummer, but you could plug that into something else to get color out of it. You could use that to blend two colors together, okay? So that's my, there we go, there's my noise. So yeah, so when you're done with, and you're accepting and you're liking the way that it's sort of mapped on the, or you know, what it's gonna be like when you plug it into something else, you can just take that, unplug it, unplug it. There we go. And plug it back into your color, you know, wherever you want it to be affecting, okay? So, like I said, there's a million of these. There's you know, a lot, you know, some of them aren't that great. They're you know, they're going to be sort of cheesy looking, for lack of a better term. Like they don't, you know, like leather, you know, you'd more than likely actually want to texture map leather, which, like I said, we'll get to and talk more about. But you know, see, this is what they call leather, and it's just, you know, it's not that great. So, you know, these things are, you know, not actual textures, not photos or anything. They're made as you go. Okay. I'm gonna delete some of these. Okay. And keep in mind too, when you delete nodes here, they're actually deleted. They're not being hidden. So you want to be careful what you do here. It's really easy to you know, think that you're just hiding stuff away, but you're not. I'll show you what's. So to clean this up, that's what this is for. So if I hit this, it'll clear the graph, but it didn't delete the nodes that were in it. So I still have that surface. And if I hold down my middle mouse button, drag it in here, there's that default surface, right? So what these guys do up here is they help you sort of just manage your display, right? Because as you just saw, I plugged a bunch of things into that default surface that we made here, right? But you know, where are they, right? By default, it's just going to show you the thing that you drag in here. If you click this button right there, it'll show you the ins and output connection. So if I click that, I'll get where I was before with this. This is that noise texture, and then you don't need to worry about that one. So that's how you sort of you know, manage your workspace here. You just, you know, just like I said, you just clear them up, okay? So these guys will, these are the same thing that you see right here to show you less or more information. So you click these, you know, like it just allows you to, you know, select a bunch of them and say, you know, show me everything. And I'll show you a whole bunch of information or little information or nothing, right? Okay. Or, there we go. Okay. Okay. And then this thing, this is the thing that shows you the search for, like if I type in specular, I'll get only the nodes that are about specular, and reflections or whatever it might be, coatings, whatever. Okay. By default, they're turned off. You want to turn them on right there. Okay. Yeah. So hand selection, you don't want to mess with that. Don't want to mess with that. Okay. Yeah. So that's the easiest way to go. So this clears the graph. Middle mouse button, drag it in there. So when you have a bunch of materials, all you got to do is drag it in there. When you need new nodes from over here, you just click on them and they'll show up. You don't have to middle mouse button them or anything like that. Okay. Okay. So one of the nodes I was talking about that's actually really handy is so you know how you can put colors in one by one over here, right? In any material, say you have 50 materials, you could make them all pink by going like this and putting in pink in and all that stuff, right? So color constant is a really handy node in that it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a single constant color, and that's all this. Some of these nodes are actually really simple in what they do, and you can wire them up to do all kinds of nice stuff. But reuse them, right? So if I come over here and I go to my color constant and I put that same pink color in there, like so. So all this thing's doing is kicking out pink, right? That's all it's doing. Okay, and I can wire that as many times as I want. So if I run around and I create a bunch of different shaders, oops. Right, say I make 3 different shaders. Man, God, my machine is slow today. Okay, so now I have 3 different shaders. No, just 2. 1, 2. Okay. Standard shader. Boom. Okay. So I have, like I said, I got 3 different ones, and we'll put it. I'll say I'm going to take one of them and come onto the robot. Grab some of the robot pieces, whatever. So I'm right clicking here and I'm going to assign material to viewport. So if you right click on any material, you'll get this, and there's a few different things you can do here. Okay. In this instance, I'm just going to assign material to viewport selection. So I've selected some parts over to the right there. Boom. Now that guy's on that. Okay. Then I'm going to take this bottom one. I'm going to select the whole set that I have here, the little, maybe I'll make this bigger. There we go. Set, right click, zoom in apparently. Oops. Right click, assign. You can also drag and drop with your middle mouse button, like so, like that. Okay. And then I guess on this ball, that one might already be on there. I'll just do that. Okay, so if I come in here, I can take these and I can wire them all to the same color, right? But they can have obviously different values, right? So like, this, oops. So this thing down here, so if I let the material go, could be, say, crazy shiny by making it kind of metal, and turn the roughness way down and turn the index of refraction way up, right? But it's sharing the same color with these guys. So if I click on this one, so tell you what, I'll rename these for make life a little easier. There, so AI shiny. Keep the default. So see, when it rendered this one, same color, different handling of the surface, right? Okay, and this is just one part of it. And once again, you can plug as many of these things in as you need to get whatever you need done. And I come up here, like I'll make this one really not shiny. So we'll turn our reflection weight way down. There we go. So it's almost nothing. So okay. So the point here is that I got 3 different surfaces all tied to one color, and now to make a change across the board, all I have to do here, click this one node, and it's going to feed into all these other nodes, right? So it's going to feed into this one that's medium shiny, and it's going to feed into this one that's really shiny, okay? All feeding from one thing, all feeding from one constant color, okay? And this could be anything. It could be anything like that. It could be a map, you know, a texture map, which once again we'll get to. It could be noise. It could be any of these kind of things, right? So by wiring these things up, you're like I said, you're making essentially instanced assets that you're using all over the place, right? I mean, you could take this, like the great thing about, you know, these things is that about a constant color is that keep in mind that it's got 3 values in here, right? So I could actually take this and I could call this the thing to, you could say color, and you could call it, you know, shine. And this is actually a really good thing to do because you can sort of fix things globally this way, right? And so you could take this and you could say, well, I only want the one color. You could throw out these and not use it as the color. I'll tell you what, let's do this. Duplicate that node, and I'm going to call this one. I'm going to continue to use this one for color, but I'm going to use this one for shiny, right? So I could come in here and just grab the one value, and I could click it or put it into the specular amount of all these objects. Or you could even divide it up if you really wanted to, but it gets kind of confusing. Specular. So once again, keep in mind, you know, up here I'm using red, green, and blue to go into all these objects. Here I'm only using one channel of the color, okay, of this one. So you know, the things that I do in green and blue don't really matter in this instance, right? So now if I go in here and I mess with this color in the red, really it's all just about the amount of red in this color, which you would want RGB. So okay, so this would be 1, this would be 0 all the way down here, okay? So if I wanted a bunch of, and you'll see what it actually is making a change. Oh, this is the one with the metal, so, okay. Click. There we go. So, okay, so if I come over here, and since that's wired to it, you could just do black and white. So as I tweak that up, the amount of shininess is, or the amount of reflection on this object is getting turned up because it's being controlled by this color. So this is essentially a slider for this right here, because you see how it's wired right there. Okay, so if I come back over here to the color and I bop that up, I come back to the surface, you'll see it's pretty much in the same place because it's wired, you know, they're wired together. And you see that because these things change. So when you get a little checkerboard, that's a channel that's available to get something plugged into it. This will take you to whatever it's plugged into. So if I click that, it's going to go over to this color. Oh, wait a second. Oh, this one's still connected to something. Oh, I clicked on the wrong one. Sorry. Yeah, this is the one where it's connected to the weight. So specular color. Yeah, so if I go there, I end up over here, color shiny. See what I'm saying? So yeah, so like I said, you can plug these things in any way you need to, and you can get, you know, multiple values wired together so that you only have to change, you know, one in one place. So if you had this all set up like this, and you know, and somebody said, oh, you know, all this stuff is too shiny, all you'd have to do is click the one value and boom, you'd change them all across the board. Okay, so if you have a constant value coming out of a color like this, then you can use it across the board over and over again. Okay, so like I was saying, so that's just one node. So if I went in here and I went back to Maya and I said color, so that's a constant color constant, add it to favorites, it's going to show up when I go here. I only have that in there. Oh, no, wait, actually it comes with a bunch of them in there, so I would get rid of all of these. So another interesting one is the ramp shader. This actually comes in really handy. So that's in there by default. And a ramp shader is wild because it allows you to sort of put color. Oh no, hey, no, that's not the ramp. Hold on. I want the ramp color. That's a shader. Ramp, color ramp. Okay. Color ramp is cool because it allows you to put as many colors in as you need and in any way that you need, right? So here I am on the color ramp node, okay, and by default it goes from black to white. And so you see it's going from black at the bottom all the way to white. So all you gotta do is click in here and you click there, and that changes, oops, that's white, yellow. So now it goes from black to white to black to yellow, then to white, right? So you can put as many of these in there as you like, and you can do whatever you want with them. So if you needed, like this would allow you to like design a texture map for like a candy cane that wraps all the way up around it without having to use a texture map. You could, literally go in here and just say, okay, I want to alternate between white and red, and boom, you're done. You don't have to, paint this or anything like that, because like I said, what you'll see when we get into texture mapping, what a pain in the butt it can be, right? So there's a few different ways that it can be, what they call, interpolated, meaning like by default it's like a gradual fade from these colors like that, okay? But if you go to like bump, that doesn't look like much. Linear, exponential. So this is just sort of the curve on how they do it. Yeah, those are nothing special. Just go back. Oh, yeah, so there it is. That's what I was looking for. So if you do none, it's just going to sort of alternate the colors, right? So this is what I was talking about. This is what I meant by like a candy cane. So if I took this and I chose my colors properly. Okay, red. I'm going to get rid of these real quick. Get rid of that one even. Because you can also drag these colors. Like if I click here and then drag over. Okay. So now you see I'm making stripes, like really, really easily, not having to go into Photoshop or anything like that. So now if I take this and I take the out color, I can plug that into one of these objects, and I should get something out of it. So I click on the object. There you go. So, it's mapped. It's got the, if I was looking for stripes, boom, no texture mapping. I got my stripes, okay? And let me see if it'll actually show up on the objects that I put it on. So I'm going to go back to my viewport eventually. Click that. Hello. So this turns on textures, and remember this turns on textures in the viewport. Man, woo-wee. There you go. So this is what this is how it's going to wrap it on those objects that are using that surface. And like I said, this is all without texture maps or anything like that. So that's you can do all kinds of cool stuff with this one. And this is just one of them. So ramp is called gradient in other packages. I don't know why. I mean, they call it ramp because they felt like calling it ramp. And you can also choose. You can also make it a circle like this. Let me click back on it. There it goes. So this would create like a bullseye effect essentially. There's so this is just choosing on how it should be sort of displayed. Diagonally would go from corner to corner. Yeesh. Yeah, I see what it's doing there. So you got lots of choices on how it should be shown or sort of drawn. I guess you could say they even have one for a tartan ramp, which I think should be like a plaid, right? Yeah, there you go. So, instant plaid without having to, go and do it, Okay. So let me see. Okay. So, that's definitely one to, throw in the favorites folder. So if we go back over here, I'm just going to run through and look for some of the better ones. Like I said, a lot of these, you can tell that you don't need them. Shader effects, game hair. This is for some kind of a game, specific for game engine. Stingray is a special render engine. That like I said, you pretty much don't need to worry about. Like I said, a lot of these you can use not to worry about. Hair that that may come into. usage, ocean, you know, so that's Maya surfaces, right? Then you get into volumetrics, which we don't want to talk about right now. We don't want to talk about that either. So some of the useful ones are checkerboards, believe it or not. Checkerboards are nice for, you know, just making sure things are going okay on your object. You don't really use them unless you need a checkerboard, but if you throw it on an object, you can see exactly how it's sort of wrapping around, or if your smoothing is not going well. Cloth produces like a procedural cloth that you see here that, you know, if you shrink it down enough, it's fairly convincing as long as you don't expect too much out of it. You know, it's okay. But hopefully you start to see how the layering of these things, how handy the layering of these things can be, and the fact that you can plug these things in, right? So if I go here and I select my cloth, you'll see, you know, by default, it's the color it chooses is black for the little, black for the little holes in between, you know, the gaps in the threads. A color, a U color for like, for the threads going up and down, and then a color for that direction, right? Sorry, for the vertical direction, okay? You know, or no, sorry, horizontal direction, right? Okay, but, you know, what you're going to get out of that is just very clean, you know, perfect, cloth, you know, perfect colors, right? So, you know, the best way to get variance out of it, that, you know, without painting it, is once again just going in and grabbing one of these, you know, grabbing a noise node. You can actually get them. Oh, bins master. There we go. So if I look for my texture, my Brownian was decent, right? So I can just create a duplicate of that. So I've got another. This is another noise, and I come in here. You know, so, you know. See what I mean about variance, right? So if I go in and I choose my two colors, I make it kind of a brown. Well, let's go with blue. Oops. Damn. Okay, sorry. So I'm gonna go with like a blue, maybe less saturated. So I'm trying like a gene situation here, right? So I plug that in there, and I do another blue over here, maybe a little darker. Okay, so once again, you know, these are real close, but they're subtle. I can take that color, I can roll this out. There they are. So then we just look for our colors, like there you go, the color gain, color offset, blah, blah, blah. Gap color, and I'm looking for the U color. So there it is right there. I can take that, plug it in there. So that blue, so you can actually see it. They're like these threads are a little darker than over here. So it just creates something that's not perfect. You know, it's like half the time with these things, you're fighting how perfect things are. You know, they don't look real because they're just too perfect. So if I make a copy of that and I maybe up the octave so that it's a little more noisy, and then maybe, I don't know, take the color and knock it down a little bit. So I just made another copy, and I'm going to plug that one into the V color. Where'd it go? Hello. Oh, there it is, V color. So there you go. So I mean, well, that's a little much, but you see what I'm saying. If I zoom in here, you see I just got some, you know, some interest. You know, if I zoom out, I mean, it looks a little dirty, you know, but you just screw with these values and you get something fairly decent without a lot of work and without a lot of mapping, you know. So if all I have to do is come back here and, like, you know, I don't know, just like I said, just start messing with these until you get something that's closer to what you want, you know. See, like there, I messed up my other. Bring it down. One of these went, oh, there it is. Okay, so I screwed with that one. Oh, alpha gain, there it is. Okay, so, you know, like I said, if you just mess with these colors a little bit, maybe mess with the cloth. So you can put some wave in there. Oops. So this also messes up the surface a little bit. Messing up meaning like you know, it just is creating variance, right? And if I throw it on the background, whoa, gonna have to scale that down a little bit. A whole lot. Anyways, yeah, see how big it is. So you know, that's usually going to be in the things where so the widths here, I probably need to scale it way down. Yeah, so if I went like 0.07, 0.07, and so wait, width, gap color. Well, that's mapping on there better, but it's still too big. Let's see. Coverage, repeat, there we go. 20 by 20, there we go. So that's a lot closer to, no, well, this is part of the mapping that we'll come back around to, but so you see, like, you know, that's, like I said, that's fairly decent, and that's all procedurally created, meaning made at render time, you know, like it, and it's not bad, you know, depending on the object and depending on how close you need to get to it, it's not too bad, it's not too shabby, and it's all sort of, you know, free, for lack of a better term, and it's not, you know, it looks okay. So it's created through, you know, this cloth and a couple of noisy blue colors plugged into those, creating variants, creating things that are a little bit different, and you know what you get out of it is really not too bad. Okay. And so over, you know, there's tons of these kind of things. So when I was going through the surface, or the 2D textures, you see them. So fractal is just another type of noise. You'll see it's actually, you know, quite noisy. It's a nice one. It's good for all kinds of stuff. Like, you know, it kind of looks like the ocean if you plugged in colors here. You know, it kind of looks like water or whatever. Remember, once again, you can plug these values into anything that you need to. You know, so if I'm trying to create a lot of variance, you know, like in something, this is a nice one. Like this would be good to plug into the shininess of an object that like is kind of papery, right? Where it's subtle, but it's kind of complex. Excuse me. Where'd it go? Here it is. Okay. So that's another one to keep handy. You'd be surprised how handy grid is how handy grids can be. So it just creates a grid, okay, that you can make more dense, or you can create you can make the lines more dense. You can control the colors, all kinds of stuff. You can blur it. That's what filter does here. So I turn that guy up and wait a million years. You can bump the contrast down. Come on. Oops. There it goes. Okay. So anyways, there's grids. Man, that's no good. Mountain, that's no good. There's your noise that we already played with. They you know, actually have an ocean color shader essentially that you can take a look at. It's really, so you have wave height, and you can map that. Remember, this is just like the thing for extrusion. You could make it change over time. You can put different colors in there, whatever you need to do. PSD file will load a Photoshop file, of course. Ramp we already talked about. Simplex noise. This is the sort of cloudy noise that you see here. There's a bunch of them, and you know, like I said, you can. And the nice thing is that different ones have different abilities. Meaning, like, you know, some of them allow you to, you know, choose colors. Others are just, you know, like this one, like the grid allows you. You know, I can make the colors anything I like. I don't know why this isn't showing up properly. Where's my grid? I'll just get a new one. So, you know, you obviously can map these. You know, if you wanted to put these on a window, you could make fake window doohickeys, or actually just use this recently, like for a packaging that has like a where they smush it together. It's sort of it's geez, what's the best word? Like it's kind of crushed together with like heat, and the little lines on it look like a grid in the end, a very 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 fine grid. So it's like I just made a whole bunch of I made it small but contrasty, blurred it out a little bit, and it worked perfectly, right, without having to do a bunch of stuff there. Okay, so like I said, you can mainly just kick these things around and see what you like, and then just create a favorites list here so that you can get at them. Fractal. I don't know how that got in there. Surface. Okay. So you'll find those all in 2D textures and 3D textures. Now the difference between the 3D textures and 2D textures is what I meant by saying it's sort of like it's three-dimensional, meaning the object sort of goes through it, whereas you see how these are kind of mapped on the object? See how they kind of flow through it? Or they flow around it, whereas if you make a 3D texture, and they're off on their own here, and I plug that into... So I'm going to clean this up because it's really getting out of hand. So I click that, go back, get that guy. So that's this one with the checkerboard on it or whatever. I grab my marble, make a new marble, map the ins and outs. So I'm going to disconnect the so that's the ramp that I made into the plaid shape. Disconnect that. I'm going to get that marble again. Out color, and plug that into the base of this surface. And boom, so you see that. So this one, like I said, it's you can almost think of it as cheese. It's three-dimensional in that, like, if you cut into it, you'll just find more of the same stuff, like soap or whatever. So this surface, if I moved pieces of it, it's not going to stay with the surface. It's going to go through it, right? So see how it's doing that? That's because this, like I said, it's three-dimensional, and that can be good and that can be bad. Usually, mostly good, really. But so if I move a bunch of pieces of it, you can. Jeez. My God, my machine is pissing me off. Okay. So you see here. So. See it's like I'm moving, moving through that texture, because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm moving through it. So, like I said, the good thing about this is that it's everywhere, so you don't have to worry about mapping in any way. So that's why your 3D noises are better than your 2D noises, because they are actually on the they're not on the surface. Okay, so if I plug the plaid back in here and I make a change. Oops. Base color to base color. So there's my plaid. Now if I move these, okay. Since this is a 2D texture, I got this out of 2D textures. See how it stays with it? It's not moving through it. Okay. That's the difference between a 2D texture, and I got that, like I said, it's that was a ramp that I made into this texture. So the ramps are a 2D texture that's mapped on the object, whereas a 3D texture is once again a 3D texture that the object is sort of just wherever surfaces happen to be is where color is going to show up, if that makes any sense. Yeah, like I said, I mean, the best analogy is like cheese or wood. If you cut through it, there's just more of it, and it's going to change. That's exactly how you can think of 2D textures as like a sticker that's on the object that's going to stick with it, whereas the 3D textures, like I said, are like wood or any volume that you would cut into and find just more texture. Okay, and it's making that for you. Okay, so all these ones like the leather and the granite and the rock, I mean. The rock is a really good example, because if you cut through a rock, you just find more rock. So I don't know why these ones aren't colored properly, but they are. So here's their rock texture. It's not the best thing that's ever been, but it's more of a noise, and you could use it as a noise, but it's three-dimensional. All these ones in the 3D are three-dimensional. Okay, we don't need to worry about that. I don't worry about that. No layer textures. Don't need to worry about that. So utilities are another one that that the bummer about utilities is that you need them a lot, but there's a lot of them and they're kind of hard to, it's best to go search for these. I mean, there's too many of them for us to go through, and there's lots of them that you don't need to really even know about, right? But just know that if there's something you need to do from a texture standpoint, there's going to be a utility node to help you do that. And lots of them are self-explanatory. Like, you see this one, blend colors, right? It's exactly what you expect. It's blend two colors, right? So think of my example where I was talking about inside a car, right? And you wanted to say, okay, I want a base color, okay, but I need to make variants of it. I need part of it to be darker and I need part of it to be lighter or something, right? So what you could do is you could take those constants. I'm going to go back up here. So I'm going to take this constant, I'm going to take this constant, and I'm going to say, okay, so this is, we'll call it color constant root, okay? And then I'm just going to call this one color constant darken, right? So I could take these and we'll make our root color something, so that's, we'll make it like tan-ish. There we go. We'll make it like this, like a tan color, right? But if and then I'll make this one black, right? So if I go in here and I take color 1, color 2, I go back to my blend color node over here. Let this go. I can blend between the two, as you might imagine. It's a simple node, right? So this would allow me to darken colors, and then I would just take the output of this and plug it into whatever I want to, plug into. So if I go back to this surface, you see this color is now being made from my color constant root, my darkener, and then just blending the two together. Okay, no big deal. It's like I said, it may seem like there's a lot of these, and there are, but some of them are just are simpler than others. So this would be a perfect way to build sort of a series of colors without having to custom make every single color. And you could just you could darken, you got your black, and I could make another variant really easily by duplicating that, making it white, calling it lighten. Oops, lighten. Duplicating this, Control D, plugging in my root color into this one, then plugging in the lighten, which is the white, and then just deciding on how to mix the two together, like go that way. I get more of this is the root color. Color number 1 for some reason is on this end. And then as I go this way, I'm mixing more white in. Wow, really quickly. There, so now I get a lighter color out of that one, darker color out of this one. Oops, out of this one. Out of that one, but here's my root color, okay? So that's just a simple color math. The cool part about this too is that it has the blender, just like anything else, can be mapped, right? So even though it's a slider here, there's nothing stopping me from plugging, taking the color out of this rock texture, oops, one of the values out of the rock texture, plugging it in there, and now this controls how the two are blended, right? So in some places it's going to be less, in some places it's going to be more. So this could be, it could be this ramp, it could be anything. So you can plug all these things into each other depending on what you're trying to get at, but the most useful things are just sort of, taking simple textures, and instead of having, when you make a material, instead of just having these really simple values, plugging in something to make it a little bit different, something that makes the edges a little crisp, a little, odd, or that makes the color not perfect, because once again, a lot of things just aren't perfect. You could, it's literally limitless, but it's a great way to build surfaces without having to paint them and having to do all this stuff and letting the computer do a lot of the work. Okay, so if I go back into utilities, like I said, I'll just run through a couple of ones that are pretty useful. So blend colors is always useful, as you might imagine. Channels choice, no clamp, color composite. Color constant, we already talked about. Color correct is handy. A little confusing, but it's essentially a node that would allow you to, color correct, meaning like take a color that comes out of something and just basically do things to it the way you would do in Photoshop. You know how you go into Photoshop and you adjust the contrast or you adjust this or that, blah, 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 blah. You see, I could shift the hue if I wanted to. So if I go in here, so what I did here is I took my constant color, blended with a little bit of black in this node using, I'm gonna unplug that. There we go. So now it's just blended together. It should just be a darker brown. Oh. Ooh, wee. Well, screw it. Okay, so then I come back to my color corrector, and I could shift the hue. See, so now I went from brown to add green in. This is basically just if you in Photoshop, if you're doing hue and saturation, they have that hue shift. It's the exact same thing. If you want to turn down the saturation, like say you went in here and you wanted to take one of these colors but it's just a little too much, you throw a color correct on there and you knock that down. Anything could be plugged into this. If if you liked this, this plaid, but it's too bright and you didn't want to like mess with changing all these colors, you'd plug it into a color correct node, turn the saturation down, and you're done. So they're just little utilities to do whatever you might need to do. There's a million different ways to get at the same thing, but these you just think of these as sort of like little machines that do something, and you're just wiring the output of this into the output of that. Okay, so color mask. No. Like I said, a lot of these they get a little too. So there's contrast. That's a nice one. If you. This is even nice if lots of times you'll load up a texture, an actual picture, meaning an image, and it's not contrasty enough. You run it through this thing, you can contrast it up. You don't have to run over to Photoshop. You just do it in here, Let's add that to favorites. No. Like I said, some of these get a little nuts. Actually, a lot of these get a little nuts. Luminance is nice. You can just mess with the luminance part of your object. That means your brightness. So it's just a way to quickly knock down your brightness. We won't mess with some of these. Quad switch, remap color. No. Reverse is nice. Sometimes you need the negative of something. That's all this does. So if I come over here and I got my plaid again. Oops. Got my plaid. I knock it into reverse. Oops. Click on that guy. Just, it just inverse in Photoshop, right? Once again, just saves you time. Just boom, do it here. Don't have to go off and make a thingy, make a change in Photoshop, right? Just do it in here. Okay. So that's a lot of them. They're when I break it out, these are the ones that a lot of times are your most used ones. There's a composite. I don't know if I got the composite. So there's one that allows you to sort of mix two things together based. I'll find it another time. So yeah, like I said, I mean, you make yourself a favorites list, and you're in good shape. You don't need to, and the ramp is really handy. The color constant is handy. The fractal, some of your noises and some of these color correctors are the things you're going to use most and want to wire together. Like a lot of the other stuff is just sort of advanced things that you don't need to worry about so much anymore. So there's a lot in there, but a lot of the 2D textures, the 3D textures. And your utilities is where the sort of meat and potatoes are. Okay. So that and like I said, these are the ones that are in Maya that are still going to work. They're for the most part still going to work in Arnold, which is what we've been dealing with. Now Arnold's going to have its own nodes for you to get at too, but a lot of them, you can not worry about so much too. They have their own, flakes actually create sort of like a car paint, like the metal flake that you see in certain objects. We've already covered AI image, which is just loading an image for Maya. It has its own noise, which we talked about a little bit. We don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about those. Okay, so they got their own light shaders. You don't have to worry about that either, too. Okay, so some of the other ones that are useful in here are the mix shader is kind of nice. So if you're making an object that had two different surfaces that are very different from each other, the mix shader, the Arnold mix shader, allows you to go between them. A perfect example is something that's rusty, right? So if you think of an object that's rusty, you've got say it's painted, but it also has rust on it, right? The paint is more than likely going to be very shiny, whereas the rust is like almost completely not shiny, right? So you've got two completely distinct surfaces between the two, but this isn't something you can there's no way for you to isolate the rusty part from the other part, right? So the mix shader allows you to make different zones like that, right? So I could, and I'll show you good example, example of that. It goes like this, right? So tell you what, let me start over. I'll clean it out. I'm gonna grab a mix shader. Okay, I'm gonna grab two standard surfaces. Okay, so boom, 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 boom. So I got my mix and two surfaces. I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna turn my shininess down completely on one. And see, this would be a perfect place for a noise shader, a noise color plugged in here, because rust is just red and black and little bits and stuff like that. So if I plug that into the color, it'd be pretty nice. Rust is a really good thing to do with just noise maps. For here, I'm just going to do it like this. So if I let this go. Let my renderer go, it's going to make that's too shiny, so I'll turn my specular down. So, that's the non-shiny rust. Then if I go back over here to my second surface, and I'll call this my painted surface. Oops, solo. So let's see, we'll make this kind of turquoise, like so. Okay, so I've got shiny surface, standards, and then rusty surface. Damn, man, why? Oh. Okay. So I can name that, just for ease of use, I'll name them rust and AI. So notice I left the, I'm leaving the prefix on these objects. This way I know it's an Arnold shader, right? So by leaving AI at the start, I'm sort of leaving breadcrumbs for myself, Same here. Like if I was going to rename this, I'd leave AI mix and I'd call it painted rusty, right? Just to save yourself time when you're sort of looking at these graphs, okay, this is a mix, AI mix as it says here, okay. So I can just take those two shaders, plug one into one shader, plug the other into the other shader. Okay, and then I have a mix control, and I can mix them, by hand, but that's not what we really want to do here. So, and I'll grab like a noise. I'll grab Arnold's noise and see if I can get it to work. And I'll take, and since notice it's green, so it's only going to take one color. So I'll take just the red channel out of the noise, plug it in there. So this is going to tell Arnold how to mix these two colors together, and it's kind of already doing it. So what I'm going to do over here, though, is try and make it more contrasty. Okay. Yeah, it's starting to peek through. I don't know why it won't preview for me. So yeah, see, it's already starting to mix, and then let's see here. So active distortion, amplitude, scale, offset. So okay, hold on 1 second here. Actually, I'm gonna get rid of that one, and I'm gonna go back to my favorites, and I'm gonna grab fractal noise. I like fractal noise a lot better. What? Oh gosh, I jumped right over this. Sorry. This button right here on most nodes is what they call a solo node. If you click that, that's what's going to show up in your preview, or should show up in your preview. Geez, sorry about that. I should mention that. So if you'll see it all over the place, right? So if I click over here, it's going to just render the rust no matter what else I click, right? So by default, it's going to in your preview window over here without an S clicked, meaning solo. It's going to just go to, it's going to render whatever you click on, right? So if I click on that, I move over to there. If I click solo, it's going to always render this turquoise, even if I click over here, okay? So if I let that go, and then click to the rust, it does that. It's going to come back to the rust, and eventually render that. There we go. Okay, so some of the, oh shit, color corrector, that's wrong. Fractal. There we go. So the fractal is one that can be previewed here. See, so like I said, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to mix in. My idea is just to have a little bit of rust on there, right? So by default, if you see, there's a lot of white and there's a lot of black. So by using this as a mix value, you know, black is going to be one of the materials, white's going to be the other material, right? So what I'm going to try and do is try and get to a point by just messing with the values. Frequency ratio, amplitude threshold. Threshold should do it. So threshold is going to just throw out, there we go. So that's good. So if you think of this, if I think of my white areas as where I want my paint, and then the black areas where I want just like little bits of rust, I'm getting closer here, right? So that's what threshold is doing here. So amplitude is sort of like, there we go. That's kind of nice. So like I said, if you think of these little areas, this is where I want my rust to be, and this is where I want to be painted. So I'll just get little peek-throughs of rust. Okay, white being the painted, black being the rust. Ratio. There we go. Ratio. Maybe down a little bit. And you just, I hate to say it, but you just got to play with these things to sort of get it into a place you like it. Okay, so one thing I see here too, or one thing I see is that it's not sort of contrasty enough. So, you know, I'm going to go over here, grab the contrast, and just run it after this guy, like so. So I'll grab the color out into, no, the value, and I'll solo that, bump my contrast up to make sure I'm getting like good black and whites. And see, it's kind of knocked it down, so I'll turn the threshold up. Oof. There it goes. Okay, there we go. So now I have some nice, very dark areas, and I have some nice white areas. Maybe that's too much. Okay, so now if I take that value, so once again, I have my mixer over here where I plugged in shader 1 and then shader 2. So if I just take the out value, so this is my, so like I said, so I've made fractal noise, bump the contrast way up, and then I'm just going to take one of the values and use it as the telling this thing how to mix the two colors together, and hopefully we get some rusty bits in there. Might be too small. Oh yeah, there's some. So I'm gonna come back and try and up my scale. So they're showing up, but you can barely see them. They're just these little guys. Repeat. Two. Whoa, too far. There we go. So there we go. So, you know, you can see the green, you know, the green is being mapped to where the white was coming out of this noise, and the black is the rust, right? So I'm just going to keep shrinking this. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to make the value, I'm going to bump my contrast up even higher. I'm going to go to 8. So this is RGB, so they don't label these. So, you know, essentially you want these across the board because I want to make contrast in red, green, and blue channels. I'll come back to this guy. Even solo that. So I'm going to look at my texture again without, you know, rendering on the shader ball here. Yeah, see, so I got just a few little bits here. So if I come back to the original fractal noise, I'm going to bring my threshold down again, just to sort of bump the value up. So you can see how this would add a whole lot of noise. So I'll click that. There we go. So now you see what I'm saying. So if you look real close, you know, you couldn't do, like, if all I did was put a color underneath there of rust, it wouldn't look right because, you know, these are two different materials really being mixed together. They're, you know, rust is once again not shiny at all, whereas this painted surface is very shiny, you know. So you could mix in as much as, you know, once you have this set up, you can mix it in any way you like. So if I'm gonna, you know, if I wanted a lot of it, I just bring my threshold down even more. Wait 100 years for it to change. So there's, you know, really rusty. Now you're actually starting to see how the light is treating this area where there's actually rust. You know, it's not. Let me try and zoom in. Woo! Too far. Too bunch. Oh, there's no, there we go. Okay. Yeah, so you see how the light is being treated differently because now we're taking two separate materials and, you know, and telling it how to separate the two by using this guy, by using any of these kind of you know, by using any of these generated channels, right? So this can be this kind of noise. It could be, I mean, I could, you know, there's nothing stopping me from, as weird it would be, as weird as it might be, is to take this grid, or two of them. Let's see what we get out of that. So if I use this weird grid, or one of the channels out of the grid in the mix, come back to, now you see it's mixed by the grid. So I get paint and rust because in here, or in my grid, I got white and black coming out of it. So it's saying when you get white, make it painted. When you get black, make it rusty. So, you know, anything that you plug in there into this channel, the mix weight you see here, and that's what I'm plugging into here. They really should name it a little bit better, but that's what you're doing. You know, this is the same thing. And if I click over here, you'll see this is the grid. Okay, you're just, like I said, that's how you're controlling that. Okay, so you could plug anything you like to, or you would want to, in there. Okay. So here's a weird, I mean, if you needed such a thing, I mean, this, a good example to do this is, you know, if you're making like a solar cell, you know how they have like little lines that run through it that are perfectly shiny, then they have the blue that's pretty shiny, like glassy, you know, you can see if I go in here, you know, I got these two surfaces going, you know, you can mix them any way you need to, using anything else you need to. And there's nothing stopping you, like say you needed 3 of these, you know, say you had a surface that was 3 different types of materials, right? There's nothing stopping you from taking this mix, plugging it into another mix, and mixing in another channel in a different way, you know? So you can layer things over and over as much as you need to. That's the beauty of this node-based situation. There's nothing really stopping you from plugging this into that to make this, and you know, whatever you need to do, you know. Once again, it's not getting confused by the number of options, and just, you know, knowing you need this. You need to be able to layer things, you need to be able to make differences in surfaces, and you need to be able to sort of control the two different things, you know. There we go. So yeah, so like, you know, like I said, definitely, you know, without a doubt, as you go through these, definitely make, you know, a favorites list that'll, you know, really save a lot of time, because once again, literally probably 9 out of the 10 nodes you don't need and won't ever use, because they're really about sort of weird advanced sort of rendering tricks, you know. So here I am, like, you know, here I'm with a ramp. I just plugged one of the colors in there, and I go back to my ramp. Right, and so it's going from black to white, and let's see, let's do that circular thing. Hopefully you will not get the slow ups that I'm getting. Like I said, I think something's wrong with my machine. Okay, so boom. So where it's white, it's gonna just do a bunch of stripes here and see what we get. And we'll get more into how to control these things, you know, down the line when we get into mapping. But because, you know, this is being wrapped on this object in a special way. There we go. Oops. But you see what I'm saying? I just took 3 different things and, you know, or 3 different channels, you know, black and white, you know, one channel out of these colors, and I'm controlling how these two surfaces are mixed together in any way I need to. You know, I could, you know, like I said, the best one I think being, you know, noise, because it gives you something that's, you know, reasonably, you know, something you'd want to make, a rusty dumpster or something like that. You know, this looks. This is a good start. You know, you could just, if you mess with this fractal for a little while, you'd be real close, you know. So yeah. So yeah, so like, you know, like I said, make yourself a, you know, I mean, definitely grab these, and I can share a list of useful ones. In fact, I'll write that up and I'll put that out there just to save yourself time. But make yourself a favorites list, and you can just go to those ones over and over, and, you know, save yourself like I said, a whole lot of time. Okay. So the one other thing I want to talk about real quick too is the Maya Framebuffer, and this is actually something that's new in Arnold 2018. That's actually super handy. There's a couple of little features in here that are super cool. So we talked about rendering, not, you know, this button being the overall frame renderer, that, you know, if I click this, I'm going to get this window and it's going to chug through it and all that stuff. Sorry. Oh, there's no lights in the scene, so we didn't get anything. So let me put a light in the scene real quick. Like I said, it's got some new features that are really handy. Oh, there are lights. Sucky lights. Okay. Just put one nice big light in there. Okay. So, okay, but in the Arnold tab, so most renderers have they have their own, what they call a frame buffer, right? And, you know, I talked to some people about this last week, and that frame buffers are exactly what it sounds like. It's just something that holds the frame. It's just a buffer for where your rendered stuff goes so that you can see it, right? So Maya has its own, and Arnold, being a plug-in renderer, is basically piping into that frame buffer, and that's what you get when you use these guys, right? So Arnold's frame buffer is in its own tab here, and this is going to open it up, but this guy is it's sort of interactive renderer, and it has its own features that are very handy. Oops. 10. Just pumping up the light so we can see something. There we go. Okay. So one thing that, and this is why you should use it really more than any of the other render, the other frame buffer, is its isolation mode is really cool. And what that means is if you click right here, isolate selected, and you have your Hypershade open at the same time, one thing that it'll do is, so I clicked on an object, and you notice it selected the object in the scene, right? So it's sort of tied, you know, the other frame buffer isn't tied to the scene in the same way. So if I click on this guy and I click this, okay, and I make a change over, oops, boom, boom, okay. Then I make a change to its surface. Stop. Damn it. Okay, so I go get its surface, which was the jeans. I'm gonna make a new tab. There we go. Pop the jeans in there. What it's gonna do is, like, it will just render that part of the scene, which is really nice. It's not gonna, like, so it makes making changes. Oops. There we go. So you notice, like, everything else is blacked out, so it's ignoring that, right? So if you have a lot of, you know, if your scene is getting sort of tough to render, you can isolate just the object. Like, I can, if I click, where's the ball? So I click on the ball. See that? It just skipped that. So if I come back here and that's all I'm really worried about tweaking, I think that's this. Okay. And let's see, we'll make, yeah. There we go. So I'm making changes to the roughness. So since I have the surface selected, anything with that surface now is the thing that's going to be tweaked in the scene, right? So if I click if I click the jeans material, the background is selected. If I click this surface, anything with that surface is the only thing that's going to render. So it really is, it makes it really, really fast to get around. And that's this guy right here. So you turn that on. If you select something in the scene, it's going to be the only thing that's selected. If you select a material, it's the only thing that's selected, and allows you to, like I said, make really quick changes to whatever you're trying to do, or whatever you need to mess with, you know. And like I said, the more dense something gets, the more handy this is. You can zoom in the scene and still mess with stuff. Okay, and one of the even cooler things is it allows you to see, let's see, so my cloth. If I select the cloth, it actually is just now. If I select the surface, it's actually shading it. If I select just the texture, now I'm just messing with the texture without any shading on it, which once again is super, super handy. So if I come back to, or I'll tell you what, if a good example is the problem I was having with this guy. So if I go and I grab the robot, actually I'm going to go over here, grab the robot geometry, and I'm going to throw that painted thing on it, you know, the one with the painted and the rusty. Assign mirror material to texture, and I'm going to come back here. Okay. Damn it. God damn it. Ugh, what happened? My kingdom for another monitor. Okay. So I click back, so I'm back on my my frame buffer eventually. Okay, frame buffer with select mode on here. So I'm going to come back to my painted texture, select paint rusty. There we go. So apparently I only got on that part. Oop, wait. But like I was saying, what's really cool about this, since it's in context, so now you see how it's mapping on the object, but I can come back here and I can just hit that. Now see this, I'm seeing just the one channel on the object, which is super cool. So if I mess with this, see how it's changing? So it's sort of showing you almost like an X-ray view. If I come back, I could go all the way down to, you know, this is what the rust part is looking on the object. This is what it looks like painted. And then if I go over to the noise that's controlling the two, I can mess with it in context on the object. Ooh wee. There we go. So this is really, once again, it's really handy because remember, a minute ago I was waiting for this ball to update and update. Here, I know, okay, where it's black, it's going to be rust, and where it's not. So if I just keep messing with this, I'm going to get something that's, oh yeah, that's nice. Too dense. Threshold up. Get more white in there. And then if I go and I click back on the mixer, that's this mix, the mix node, it'll put the texture right back on top of it. So it's really cool. It's just, it's a mode that you don't get out of the normal this renderer or even the IPR renderer, right? So to get this, when you pull up this Framebuffer for Arnold, if you click over here and you click play, see this little, this is the automatic sort of renderer, meaning if you make a change in the scene, it's going to render the scene. If you go like this, it's not going to. So you can make a bunch of changes and you're not going to get those changes. But as long as that's on, and like, anything I select in the scene, once again, if I go back to my rust, there's this, there's the controller between the two, there it is contrasty, and there it is the mixer, right? Okay, so that's what this guy is doing right here. So if you want to just stop it, you can stop it, and if you need to make a bunch of changes or whatever. Okay, so like I said, it's great because it'll swap wherever you click. If you click in the viewport, boom, oops, there's the background. If I click in Hypershade, I'm messing with whatever node I'm essentially touching or clicked on, right? So like I said, if I wanted to try and get this background to work a bit better, I could click the cloth. There's my cloth, and I could figure out why it's not why it's not exactly mapping on there very nicely. There it is. Temporary to repeat. 500 by 500. Okay, and then go back to my cloth, and there you go. Now it's starting to work better, a little better. Not great, but you get the point. So this is definitely the Framebuffer to play with. It gives you a lot of nice stuff in here, and just this mode alone, the select mode is worth it because you're not constantly rendering over the top of everything. You're not constantly redoing stuff. You can come in here and you tweak these eyes, just the object, in a couple of minutes. It works with multiple selections. Like if I selected all of it, it's gonna do the trick. So anyways, super handy. So yeah, that's a lot of the stuff that's in Hypershade. I'll sort of kick out the best, some of the best nodes to play with, and ones to, everything else mostly you can ignore, which is nice. I would definitely, I guess I didn't use it all that much when I was doing this, but you can see how this would be handy now if I did have this going on, because I can, if I select objects here, they're going to show up in my Framebuffer there. Okay. Yeah, there's some other stuff. You can turn a grid on here, and you can make the pieces snap to the grid. I've never used that. I guess if you're crazy anal retentive, this would be super great, but I don't think it's a big deal. That's all those things do. You can search for nodes in your graph if you really get lost. If you got stuff going on so complicated that you gotta search for stuff, then you got a lot of there's a lot going on. So remember this is your guy that will take any surface and give you the more detailed, by default. If I drag this in there with left or middle mouse button, all you're going to see is the root node that you dragged in there. By clicking this, you're going to see the ins and outs, right? So if I also so it shows you painted and rest. Oh, that's the mixer, and then I click that guy, and there's the whole thing. That's the complete flow. So that's the painted, the rust, the mixer, and then the noise I use to mix the two. Okay, and that's the concept, and that's this guy. And like I said, these things actually exist in the background for all, almost everything in Maya. This is how Maya works, right? But this is the only time, well, one of the only times, I shouldn't say that, is that you want to really screw with this and wire stuff together like this. Like, you know, if you go into, general editors, there's a thing called Hypergraph, which is almost the same thing. I mean, it shows you, I think I've opened this before, and this obviously gets insane because this is just some of the objects in your scene, and this all can be rolled out, to show you. There you go. So this simple scene has all these nodes. So this is how all this shit's wired together behind there in Maya, and once again, luckily you don't need to mess with all this stuff. But the point is that it's like this is both good for you to know, or good to know that it's there, but you don't want to mess with this too much because it's easy to break things. This is just sort of a nicer version of what you just saw, right? Just showing you the things that you need to worry about. The cool thing about Maya is that the same way we can plug anything into anything else to create these services, other values can be wired into each other the same way, okay? I mean, I can't think of a good example, but the point is that it's like like if you say you wanted to rotate the tire. I keep coming back to cars, but if you wanted to rotate all the wheels on a car the same, you could wire their rotations together using one of these types of interfaces, so that you move one and they're all going to move the exact same way, so that you're not animating through 4 tires, you're animating one and it's propagating out to other things. The same way I wired a texture map to 3 different lights, you could map a value to control how bright they are, right? Because that number can be gotten from anywhere you want to get that number from. So like I said, it's good to know that that's back there, and sometimes these things come up where you're like, oh yeah, I need to know that, and you dig in there. But just like I said, it's just something to be aware of, honestly. So anyways, that's that's a lot of what we want to cover at this stage. Like I said, there's more, but this is some of the good stuff to know. Plugging this into that, and colors into that, and values into all these things. And that's how it's done in Hypershade. And like I said, you can modify it any way you like. If you like the list view, this is here's the list view, and that might be just fine for you. You might like this view with little tiny previews, or whatever you want to call it. It's all up to you. What you're comfortable with. You might like bins. I honestly have not used them all that much, because I just name things properly, and I usually know what, the way I like to organize is actually through naming. So, things sort themselves out, right? So, usually I would say, whatever, like painted. But if I wanted it to be in a group, I'd call it like exterior. And so all these, if I put that one next to this one, they just show up alphabetically. That's the way I like to work. But you might like the bins. The bins are good. There's nothing wrong with the bins, but I didn't grow up using them, so that I don't use them. So, but you never know. I mean, it's just one of the ways you can put this together, for your own usage and the way you like it. Like I said, I like this viewport idea quite a bit, because like I said, you can do this, and I'm still seeing my viewport, and I can click objects, and I can assign stuff by just dragging it on there. Like I can just go like that, and now I made a change, So you still have access to your scene, and but you don't have to have it in a window. And especially on this computer, it's a pain, because if I move it, it wants to dock and all that stuff. So okay, one other thing to remember too is that when this thing is running, your material preview is not going to want to update, so it's gonna freeze. That's what the red line. Remember, the red line means it's not going to update itself. So until you close that, boom, there you go. Now it's free to start rendering those guys. Okay. And let's see, where's the thing? So refresh. So you can in all these in a full material, they have a thing called a swatch in the corner here. If you right click, you can make it you can force it to refresh itself. So because sometimes it falls behind. Arnold can only render one thing at a given time. So when it's busy rendering this, it's not going to be updating these balls. That's why like some of your previews might not look right, because it's like, well, it's busy over here, or it's busy in the scene rendering stuff, and maybe it'll get to it, maybe it won't. So it's only going to do one thing at a time, so you just kind of have to deal with that. But you can force a refresh if that's what you need. Yeah, so but that's most of the stuff in here. There's a bunch of other stuff. There's there's some graphs and things. A lot of the things are all in through here. Like these tabs can be closed. They can be renamed, duplicated, or closed. So if you like a certain workspace, you could say this is what it is. Like so that you can find it, or you can close it, or whatever. But you can see how cluttered these get really quickly. Like this is just the crap I was setting up to make this painted with rusty thing. Like these little graphs get pretty messy pretty quick, because you get 15 nodes in there and things get nuts. I guess a lot of this is useless, but yeah. So yeah, that's it. And so what we'll do is we'll delve more into some of these options. We talked about some of the basic ones before. We'll go through the rest of them. But the thing to remember is that just what we learned today, and that all these things can plug into all these other things. The same way the same colors that come out of this can be plugged into that, whatever it may be. They're just values. So you just are saying, I want this to be a black and white noisy thing, or a checkerboard, or a grid, or whatever it may be, and I want those two surfaces to be either colored or controlled that way. That's all you're doing. Like all these values, both color and values to do stuff, can be mapped to values from a texture, whether it's generated or painted by you, right? And that's how you get like good, materials that have that are interesting, that have a little bit of change, have values that change, and and have colors that are just a little off here and a little off there, or little bits of dirt, and there, that kind of thing. Like I said, we've seen a lot of perfect objects. The robot that we played with here had that perfect silver all over it. Well, shouldn't it have a little dirt over here, or like, why should the surface be all perfectly shiny and all that stuff? So it's those little details and little variances in color and values that really make something a lot more realistic, and make those things pop. On top of bigger changes, obviously, or bigger things. And yeah, so and that's why you have all these channels to plug into this and plug into that, and it's a really cool way to work, really, because some programs don't work this way, and it's harder to make these kind of surfaces. It's cool to be able to say, well, I want to control this with some noise, or I want to control this with dots, or I want to, whatever it may be. So it's a great way to work, and it's nice. It's always been a really nice material editor. So that's it. We don't have any. I would just, like I said, I'll send out a list of the best nodes to play with here from the Create tab, or and I would kick them around if you get a chance. Just a little bit. Try and control a couple of surfaces or whatever. Try and mix a few things together, and whatever. So, but that's all we have to really say today. So, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.